Welcome to Data to Decisions. In this episode, we will take a publicly available data set and convert it into an effective and insightful report in Microsoft Excel. Specifically, we'll be taking this economic news release that was released just a couple of days ago on unemployment and employment statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which provides unemployment and the labor force numbers for each state within the United States. This is the topic that we're going to deal with. We will be using some simple Excel techniques to create an entirely dynamic and interactive report. So what you see on screen is the final output, which provides answers to the key questions on this topic. When we look at the raw data, some of the questions that we need answers are: which states have had the highest unemployment rate? Which states have the least unemployment rate? Similarly, which states have seen the increase in unemployment rate recently? And also, change in unemployment rates compared to the past year. For example, here we are dealing with November 2023 data. We want to know which states have seen an increase or a decrease compared to the November of 2022, about a year ago. So these very simple basic questions, we want to find the answers to in an effective manner. So with our objective to find answers to these questions, the first thing I did was to come up with a mock-up or a wireframe of what my final report would look like. At the beginning, what I had in mind was just a side panel on the left where I have all the summary metrics answering these key questions. At the same time, I want to leverage the fact that this is a geographic data because we have data by state. I want to have a more interactive map visual, which allows the user to look at different measures in an interactive, dynamic way so that the map represents the specific measure the user chooses. I also wanted to have the top 10 and the bottom 10 table, which provides the states with the highest unemployment percentage or the lowest. So it's very easy to see them in a table format. And also, this is also dynamic. If I change a measure, then you can see that the table also updates based on that measure. So this is the effect that I wanted to have, but obviously there is a lot of steps that go from the raw data until this point of a final report, which works and functions the way we want. So I listed down the steps that I need to accomplish or the features that I need to enable in order for me to complete this report. Those are the specific tasks that I will be going through step by step. Let me just give you the list of those so that you understand what we will be covering in the rest of the video. First of all, we are sourcing the data from a website. So we want to make sure that we connect to the website, extract the data into Excel. Next, we want to make sure that the data is clean and all the data that we need are present in that table and nothing more. Then, if there are any issues with the data, we need to make sure we clean it up before we produce the final report. Then we need to make sure that are there calculations that we need, but they're not in the raw data. Then we need to add them to the data. Then we go about developing this report. First, on the left side, as I said, we need these summary numbers, the number of states where there is an increase, decrease, and all that. So we need to calculate those metrics. Then we need to create a visual, which is a data bar around these metrics. Then we have an interactive slicer, which controls both the map visual and also the table. So we need to make sure we set up correctly in order for this dynamic interactive slicer. Then, of course, the map visual itself has to be created and the settings for that map visual has to be set up in order to take into account the dynamic input from the slicer. And then we create these two top 10 and the bottom 10 tables with some simple Excel formula, which we have covered in one of the previous videos, but we will be doing that again. Then we also have little things here where you can see the arrows, which are red and green color and also we have arrows here on the top 10 and the bottom 10 tables, which actually show which metric are we actually sorting the tables by. In order to make sure that those arrows are dynamic, we need to write the formulas accordingly. So all of these use very simple techniques. We'll be looking at step by step how to accomplish this from start to finish. Before we get started on that, a couple of notes around where this will be relevant to you. You may not be looking at the specific exact Bureau of Labor Statistics data, but the techniques that we cover can still be relevant to you. So let me give you a couple of business scenarios. Let's say, for example, in a human resources scenario where you have employee metrics such as performance rating, training completion rates, attendance rates, and so on. So you have those measures, and then you want to analyze them by the location of the employee or the office. So that is an example where you have a geographic attribute, which is location of the employee or the office, and then you have multiple measures about the employee performance and other attributes. Another example would be in a sales scenario where you have sales metrics like sales amounts, units sold, average order value, and so on. And then you want to analyze that by the location of a sales rep, by, let's say, a state or a country where the salesperson is. Even in that case, we have a geographic attribute like the sales rep location, and then you have multiple measures about sales. So wherever you have multiple measures and you want to build that interactivity for the user to choose the measure, and you have a geographic attribute that you can use to plot on a map visual, this video will be helpful to you because the techniques that we will use and learn will apply to your scenario as well. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is to copy this URL for the website page where we're going to get the data from. I'm going to go into Excel in a brand new workbook, and I'm going to go to the data ribbon, get data from web. So I'm going to click on this. Excel will ask me what is the URL where I will be asking Excel to pull the data from. I'm going to paste that URL and then hit OK to let Excel go and grab the data that is available on the website. So let's, for example, take a look at the website again. This is the table that we want the data we extracted from. We don't need to see the other pieces of information on this page. We just want that table. So going back to Excel, already Excel has found that there is a table of data. Again, quickly scanning through, we know that this is exactly the table that we want. But instead of directly loading, I want to do transform because this option opens up Power Query, which is within Excel, but it'll open in a new window for you. And within Power Query, we can do a lot of the data manipulations, data cleanups, and everything, data exploration um, much more efficiently. So, for example, I want to look at this data that is already being loaded. I want to look at the state and area column and make sure that I understand how many states are there, how many state values are they clean, are there duplicates, are there any errors? All of those things around the data quality is much easier to do within Power Query. So for example, as soon as I selected the state and area column, you saw that there is a list of column statistics that became available. There are other ways to do this in Excel, but Power Query makes it easy because you can just select the column and see the count, the errors, empty, and everything. One thing that immediately strikes me is that there are 59 values. There are 50 states, and then there is District of Columbia, and then there are some territories, but still 59 seems too high. So let me take a look at the values there, and you'll see quickly that there is California and there is Los Angeles, Long Beach. So clearly, it is not a clear, complete list of states. It includes certain metro areas also. So if our goal is to only report on the states and territories and not of metro areas, then I want to be able to remove those metro and areas out of this list. There are multiple ways to do it. So as with anything within Excel, there are many, many ways to accomplish the same thing. In this case, you could simply go and then select and filter out the ones that you don't want in your report. That's a method that will work as long as you're doing this as a one time and you're not going to do it again. And you, even if you're doing it again, you know that the source data will never change. In those scenarios, you can just go and filter them out. So that's easy. But there's another way. For example, if I have a list of state names and I only want to report on them, I can bring that into this Power Query and make that work also. So let me do that approach. And in your case, you can choose whichever method applies. So what I'm going to do is to close and load. And this will allow Excel to load the data. You will not be able to work within the Excel sheets if the Power Query window is open. I hope that at some point they will change that. Right now, it is not possible, so I have to close that and then come into our usual Excel interface. And then here you see that the table has been loaded as a query, and then you can see all the data as a table in one of the sheets newly created by Power Query. So all that is great. Now, I have already prepared a list of states that I want to use for this report. So that is here, and you can see here that there are 52 values. So I have the 50 states, and I have the District of Columbia. I also have Puerto Rico. I added it. Unemployment data is available for Puerto Rico, so I just decided to add it. The concept is what that matters more. If you have a list of values that you want to report on, now let's see how we can do it. I have this in a table. I've already converted it into an Excel table with the name states. What I'm going to do now is go to the data ribbon, get data from table, and automatically this table of state names is loaded into our query and as a separate query. So that's good. Now, how am I going to use this? I'm going to go back to the labor force data query again and do merge query here. And why do I want to merge? So in Excel, if I want to do a join in Power Query, if I wanted to do a join between this labor force data and our list of states, I can use the merge queries option. So merge state and area is the column in the first table, state is the column in the second table. They both are same. In this case, because I've brought the data in, I'm just going to ignore the privacy levels for now. If you have state and area, and then the state as the two columns that have the same value of list of states, I have selected them. I want to do inner. So inner only matching rows means only 52 rows from the first table will be output. So I'll show you after it's done. The important thing is you choose inner because you only want the states which are in our list of states also. So let's say, okay, and let's just run this through again. If in Power Query, you can go to the previous step before the merge queries. If I click on the change type, it shows me that there are 59 rows at the bottom left. If I go to the next step, it becomes 52 rows. So exactly what we want. So I think we're going in the right direction. So let's just go to this last column here. This is because we merged with the states table. Power Query will show that table. And if I wanted to bring any column from there, I can. But in this case, we only had the list of states. There's nothing else there. So I don't really need this anymore. I think the purpose of bringing that in is already achieved. So I'm going to remove, right click and remove that because I don't need to keep that. And now we are done with the cleanup of the data. I'm just going to give this a name called data, the name of the query. The same name will go into the table. So that's why I'm naming it data. Uh, and now I'm going to go and say close and load. And now you will see that Excel will pull that instead of 59 rows loaded. It should get updated pretty hopefully soon into 52 rows. My computer gets a little bit slow as I'm recording the video as well at the time. So there you go. It is loading the data and it'll be 52 rows. Go back to the sheet and rename that sheet also as data. Keeps it simple. Now in this data table, the name has been automatically changed. We have the state, and we have 52 rows of data, and we have all the necessary columns we need. Okay, so everything looks good. I wanted to just make it into a different table design. So there we go. What we have done is we looked at the data. We found that the states, there were more than just the 50, states. There are other information that we didn't want. So we found a way to remove it. Another thing I totally forgot about would be you can go back to the Power Query by, double clicking here or right click and edit. So I'm going to double click. We saw how when I clicked on the state and the area, I can see the column statistics, right? One more thing is the column quality. If you don't see these items on your screen, go to the view ribbon, make sure that the column profile and column quality are added. If your data set is very large, sometimes this step can slow things down. But we are dealing in this example with a very small data set, so I've checked those two on, and I can see that there is no error. If you see if Excel Power Query detects any errors or invalid or empty rows, it will actually highlight them here. So you can see a solid green line below the column names. As I scroll through, there is no error, no invalid values. Another thing you want to check for zeros. Let's say, for example, in the labor force data, if there is a zero, that's doesn't look like it's right data because that's not likely to have a zero labor force for an entire state. So those things will be warning flags, but you want to make sure that you review the data and explore it and make sure that some errors or outliers like that doesn't happen. And you can use the column statistics here. For example, the minimum value and the maximum value are automatically calculated. You want to make sure that the minimum value is not zero or below zero. So that would mean that it's incorrect data. So make sure that you explore the data, make sure it's clean enough. Now that we have done that, we are ready to move on to the next steps. So coming back into our data, which is where we have the raw data extracted from the website in a table called data. Now, one thing you will notice is that in this table, we have the unemployed percent. So basically unemployment percent for November, for October, September, and the previous November. So all those data there. But what we don't have is the change in this month from the previous month, change in this month from the previous year. We don't have those calculations. So I'm going to start with just adding those calculations because that is part of the final output that we need to create. So I'm going to go ahead and type in right next to the column headers, unemployment percentage, M, small, lowercase, capital case, M, so month over month, and I'm going to hit enter. And this adds a column to the table. And I'm going to put a simple formula to say, go and select the November 2023 value, subtract October 2023 value. That's it. I'm going to hit enter. We have that calculation. I'm going to use something similar for unemployment percentage. So let me move further down here. Unemployment percentage year over year. And we will use a very similar formula, but not the same. Would be I want to take November 2023, subtract the November 2022. So I need to go all the way back here, November 2022, and hit enter. So now we have created two more calculations which are required in our final report. So now we are ready to build the foundation for our slicer. So in order to do so, I'm going to go into an open sheet, empty sheet. I'm going to call it help because this is something that ultimately the output doesn't have to have the sheet. We can hide the sheet. So I'm going to type in measure and what are the three measures that we want in the slicer. So I'm going to choose unemployment percent month over month, unemployment percent year over year. Now that I have this, I'm going to select this Control T to convert it into a table and click on my table has headers. Hit OK. So now we have a table. I'm going to insert pivot table, and I'm going to put that pivot table right here and hit OK. Okay. And now on the pivot table pane here on the right, I'm just going to check the measure, select it. Automatically, it'll put it into the rows section, which is where we want. So that's done. Nice. And now we will go and select inside, anywhere inside that pivot table, hit insert slicer. So now there's only one column. So it says measure. I'm going to hit OK. There you have it. So now we have a slicer. So what happens is when you select one of the values in the slicer, automatically the pivot table value gets selected. And there's only one being selected at a time. So cell B10 is the cell where the chosen value or the selected value in the slicer will be located. So I am going to click cell B10, go into the name bar, and then in this name box, I'm just going to type in as metric. Okay. So now what we have done is we created a table of measures, we created a pivot table on top of that, and we created a slicer on top of that. And so when you now click on the slicer, the pivot table updates, and now this metric value will change. So let's test it. I'm going to say equals metric, and it will give me the value here. And as soon as I change this, you see that the metric value keeps changing. So that part is done. Now, how do we connect this thing into our calculation? So for this, I'm going to go slicer, cut, go into the data tab, and then I'm going to go here and paste it. So we'll see how this slicer will control our values. Okay. So again, resetting our understanding of the columns here. So we have the November unemployment, we have the percentage, and then the percentage month over month. And these are the three columns that we want the slicer to choose based on the user selection. So I'm going to create a new column in column B called value, and I want to store what the user selection in the slicer is. I want to calculate the appropriate measure and store it. So let me explain how it works. We're going to use a switch function, switch open parenthesis. And what we're going to do is the switch function needs an expression, or in this case, I'm going to type in metric because metric is the name that we gave to the selection of the slicer, selected value in the slicer. So metric. And if the metric value is unemployment percentage, then use the value from this column, which is the November 2023 unemployment percent, comma. To go to the next row in a formula when you're writing, you can use Alt plus Enter. And you don't have to do it. You can write in a very wide formula, but it just makes it a little bit easier to read this way. Unemployment percentage, MOM. If the value is unemployment month over month, then use this column's value, comma, enter, unemployment percentage year over year, comma, then use this value. If none of this, then don't display anything. Let's say, for example, hit enter. So let's test it out. If I hit unemployment percentage in the slicer, then you should see values from here get represented here. So 2.4, 4.4. Let's look at the first two rows. 2.4, 4.4 should appear there as soon as I hit this. There we go. Works. Let's say month over month. Month over month is 0.1, 0.1, and then this is 0.2, right? So let's look at these values. They should come up here as soon as I select it. If I do year over year, then this should match exactly this. So it works. So what we have accomplished here is based on the selection in the slicer, the value column will automatically update. So that's what we have done. Now, in the next section, we will use this value column to create a map visual. We can also use this to create the top 10 and the bottom 10 tables. So one thing that we have to do before we go to the visual final output or the report sheet is to calculate a few things that we want in the report. Specifically, for example, when we compare with the previous month of data, what number of states with increase um, month over month. So let's say we don't need to say that. Okay. Number of states with decrease, and then number of states with no change. So we need to calculate these things. So how do we do it? We can use a count-if function. And since we stored our raw data in a table called data, I'm going to enter data, and then I will choose the, so here what we want to do is the month over month calculated value. So we already have that column which has the unemployment percentage month over month. I'm going to select that. And then my condition for counting will be double quotes greater than zero, double quotes close. So this gives me the count of states where the unemployment percentage month over month change is greater than zero. And then I can just drag it along, and which will repeat the formula. What we want is change the formula to say less than zero. That will count the number of states with a decrease in an unemployment percentage. And then finally, just say zero, which will give us no change at all. Now, when I add these, I get 52, exactly the total number of states and territories that we have in our report. Perfect. Now, one last thing I would want to do is, let's say, for example, I want to assign these calculations some names that I can use in the final report. This is a technique that, again, you can skip this and go directly in another way. I tried to do this because if you're doing a larger project where you want to isolate all your calculations into a hidden sheet or something, and then your output visualization can be a completely separate thing which just points to the calculations. Instead of doing these calculations in the final report sheet, I like to do it in a hidden sheet where the calculations can be stored, but then the report sheet is just used for visualization. So we'll see how we do it. But I want to give name to these calculated metrics. So for example, I would want to call this as M underscore unemployment month over month increase. Okay, we can even skip that unemployment thing because if this report is only unemployment, you don't need to mention it again. Keep it short at the same time. Keep the name of that you're giving short, but still understandable, right? So let me just keep it M underscore unemployment underscore mom underscore increase. M stands for metric. And then, and again, the name is completely your decision. This is just a method that I use. I will name this. I want to name this. We're not naming it yet. I just want to name that as decrease. And then this one, I would want to call it no change for NO. Now, how do I give names to these? So there's an easy way to do it. I'm just going to call a name. This is the value and this is the metric. Great. Now, how do I give this automatically to multiple cells? I can select these cells, go to the formulas, and then in the defined names, there's an option called create from selection. If I click on it, and I can say create names, because I already have the names in the right column, just use those. And I hit OK. That's it. Now, when I click on the cell, you will see that the names have been applied. This is great option if you have a lot of cells that you want to give names to. So I really like this option. So in the previous videos, we have seen how we can give names one at a time by going to the defined name. But if you have many cells, then this is definitely a recommended method. What I'm going to do now, select all, go copy, I copied Control C and then paste it. And now this time I want to do previous year. And all I have to do is to change the formula from month over month to year over year. So all the three formulas, I'm just going to change quickly to year over year. You could also do find and replace. Again, I have only three, so it's fine. I will want to change this name also to year over year. And then let's see what happens. How do I name it again? Because I copy paste it. Hopefully, yeah, it doesn't. So I can always go to the name manager and see all the names that are present in this workbook. And I can see that there's only three MOM. So all I have to do now is to select these values and then say create from selection, right column, uncheck everything else, check only right column, hit OK. There we have it. So now we have created 6 metrics and given them specific names. Now it's time to go into our report. So I'm going to create a new sheet. I'm going to call it report. And then what we're going to do is this is our canvas. This is where we're going to create our interactive report. So first thing I'll do is to like a lot of these formatting options, please consider your own choices. I'm just going to highlight the ones that I'm making. These will not change the functionality, of course, but this will change the appearance of how the report looks. So I've selected them, give a little background color, grayish, and then what I want to do is to first 2 columns, I want, I want them to be there, but not take up a lot of space because I want to put a border later. And then the C column, this is where I'm going to put my data bars in our report. So I want it to be a little bit wider. So making it wider. And then this is another column where I will be putting some arrows. And then so I've given 4 as my width. So now that I've done it, let me go and start typing in the title first. So let's say, for example, I'm going to call it 2023, and I can change the font, make it a little bit bigger, and then I'm just going to color this title with white font so it kind of stands out. The row height, let me put 30. And there we have it. Okay, so now I have the title. Then what I'm going to do is to leave 2 rows and then call it versus previous month. And then I can make it 14. And then I'm going to leave 1 row. And I'm going to start typing in number of states with increase. And then leave 2 rows, go to the next one. I'm going to type in decrease. And then go back here with no change. Okay. Similarly, I'm gonna copy this whole thing, leave maybe 2 more rows, do this previous year. These are just labels. So now let's get into our formula. So what we're going to do is to create a data bar with the number of states with increase, decrease, and all of these. Before I do that, let me just select these rows and make the row height a little bit higher. So let me make it 20. Okay. Now, this first option, number of states with increase versus previous month, we already calculated it and saved a name. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. It will automatically put that value there. And so we can do something similar. But before I do that, let's do a data bar, right? So the data bar is, you can do that by going to conditional formatting, new rule. You can say, I want to create data bar. So I said new rule and then format all the cells based on values, choose the format style as data bar, and I'm going to say a minimum number of 0 and a maximum number of 52. And this is because I know that in my data, there's going to be a maximum of 52 states. And then we start with 0, maximum is 52. That's the range that we are dealing with. And so I will select those 2 values and then give a color. So depending on what you want to choose, you can choose so. You can give a border to the data bar. I'm going to leave it as no border. And you can see a preview of how it will appear when you do it. So let's hit OK. And you see the bar. And I like to put a border around the cell itself, not the conditional formatting, but within the cell. So I'm going to go and choose, let's say, for example, this thickness. I will do, you can do any, but let's just say we do this color outline. There we go. So now we have a data bar which will represent the number of states which go from 0 to 52 and works. So what I can do is now copy that and paste it here. Now the data bar will continue, but instead of the metric increase in the number of states with increase, I want to change this to decrease. So now that's it. So now the bar is automatically showing only 2. And I can do the same thing here. Instead of the decrease, I want to say unemployment month over month, no change. 14, exactly what we want. So it looks like everything is working as expected. You can make the font a little bit different, and I can actually copy the whole thing and paste it here. And this time, what I want to do is instead of the month over month, it should be year over year increase. And then this one will be year over year decrease. And then the last one is year over year, no change. There we go. So as I said, this is how we can do data bars very easily. You can choose to write the formula directly here instead of doing it in the help sheet and then calculating here and then just pointing to that calculation here. It seems like a roundabout way to do it. Yes, for this specific case, it's a one-time report that you're doing, then you wouldn't want to do in multiple steps. But as a general best practice, if you're building complex reports, keeping all the calculations separate from the visualization is helpful because let's say I want to create another calculation or another display here using the same metric. I don't have to recalculate again. I can just point to the named rate. So it's a better method to even debug or try to trace down where the calculations are happening. This is a better method based on what I've done in the past. So that's why I'm doing it this way. So go back to the data. This is where we left our slicer. And this is where the value column automatically and dynamically responds to the slicer selection. This is what we want to create the map visual. So what I'm going to do now is click on any cell outside, go and hit insert, and then choose the maps, filled map. There'll be absolutely nothing there. That is okay. Now I'm going to right click, select data. I'm going to edit the series and the values, I'm going to select the values in this column and then okay. For x-axis, I'm going to go to the first column A, which is where all of our data is. Okay. So for some reason it didn't pick up. Okay, that's an error. I've selected A2 to A53, hit OK, and then this is P2 to P53. Okay, so now I think we're good. In this exercise, we're going to just use the numeric values to build a gradient style map. We're not going to do category. Maybe in a future video, we'll do that. So I'm going to hit OK here and OK here. Let's go and see our map. There we go. So we have a map. Now let's see if it automatically reflects to the, okay, I know that we're not able to see the numbers, but we can at least see that it's reacting. So we have connected the slicer to the map, which is our objective. Now both objects are selected. I'm going to or Control X, and which will remove it from here and take us into the report tab. Control V, and this brings us here. Great. Now we are ready to set it up. So we can set up the slicer first. What I'm going to do now is I want 3 columns of buttons. And so because we have 3 measures, and then the width I'm going to put as 7. And then the height could be 1. Or actually 1 is, okay, 1 is, that's okay. And maybe it was too big. 0.3. Okay. Now the map visual will go below and I will make it also 7 because I want them to be aligned. Height will make it 5. Okay, so now we have select both also, and I've done that, and I'm going to go to shape format where you can actually click on align left. Will make sure that the two objects are aligned. Now, a little bit of formatting again on the slicer. Because we're doing a lot with the blue colors, I'm going to stay to the same theme and I'm going to choose blue. And if I don't want the border, which is the kind of the design, approach that I'm going with, I want these objects to blend with the background. So if I'm going to go and modify the slicer, I can go to the slicer menu. I know that I'm working with this light turquoise style. I'm going to duplicate it and it'll give me a new option. So I'm going to call it custom slicer. And then I can change for the whole slicer, the background fill. I want it to match my background color. And then the border, I don't want any border, let's say. That's it. Hit OK, hit OK. Nothing changed. Okay, so I'm going to select the slicer again, and that's because even though we created a new custom slicer, that's not been applied yet. So we go back here and click on custom to apply that slicer. There we go. So it wasn't that bad. So we got it, and it still works. Wonderful. Now let's do some formatting on the map visual. So we can go always, there are some pre-built stuff available. Choose, again, this is personal preference. You choose the designs that make sense in your context. What I'm going to do is to go to format plot area, and then I don't want anything to be filled, and then go back to the chart area. Let me actually do a fill with my background color. So that filled it out, and I don't want the border. So go back to the border and say no line. So now it looks a lot more blended, and I want to format the legend to go to the top. Great. And then because the title is not needed, it's very obvious what we are doing here. So there's no, in my opinion, there's no need for a title. We're just showing the measure by state. I'm looking for a way to, let's say, go back to the series and then call it, I'm just going to put measure. Okay, so now it says measure. Okay, wonderful. So now we are making progress. I want to data labels. So I'm right clicking and choosing data labels. And now the labels up here. Can click on any of the labels. And if I want it to be slightly bigger, I update it. Wonderful. Now I do want to add the name of the state. So I can go to format data labels by right clicking and I can say show the category name and in a new line, show me the value. Okay, so now you will start seeing, let me zoom in a little bit. So now you'll start seeing the name of the state as well as the value of the measure. Now, I do want to change, right click and format series, change the color. So the way you can do that would be go into the format pane series measure. The measure is the name that we gave to the series. If you have given a different name, that'll appear in the dropdown. And I'm going to go and say best fit only. So it automatically only shows where there is a good fit. And then for some reason, they're all appearing twice. And let me, okay. So right click, format data labels. Let's say I don't want the category name. And I'm gonna now change the color. So series color, as I said before, we're dealing with the gradient color option here. In a future video, I'll work on how we can do categories like multiple colors, like 3 or 4 different colors. But now we're dealing with a gradient which goes from light to low value to the highest value. We can do 3 emoji colors. I'm going to just do 2 at this time. And if you do 3, you can choose 3 colors and then automatically the lowest value, middle value, and highest value will be taken. So if I want to just do the lowest to the greatest, I can do this. I'm going to choose the light blue and then go all the way to the darker blue. So because that's the team that I'm working with, I will choose that. And now when I click on it, you'll see that the numbers are changing. And so it's reacting, so it's working well. And if, for example, the unemployment percentage, Nevada is a lot darker blue and it's 5.4. And then the lighter ones like North Dakota is 1.9. So you can clearly see some of the states where, Vermont 2.1. So the lower unemployment percentage states are lighter in color, and then the higher is darker. Um, Again, this is just an example. In your context, based on the metrics that you're dealing with, choose the colors appropriately. And now we have the dynamic visual. We are now ready to do the top 10 and bottom 10 tables and kind of finalize the layout of this report. Now let's do a top 10 table here, right? So I'm going to just type in, and then this is where I want to have uh, my values or the table created. So first thing I'm going to do is to set up some column widths. So maybe I want the state name first, and then I will do another for, let's say, state, and then I want to have unemployment percent, and then I'm going to have month over month change, and then the year over year change. And for these two, I am going to put column width of 12 because I want to make sure that the names are readable. And I'm going to select all and then change, the background color and so that it kind of stands out as a header. So this is the header, and we can have inside border, and then we'll actually have the font in a slightly different color, bold. Let's say, okay, so we have this. Now, what we can do next is to write a formula which creates that top 10 table, right? So how do we do that? So we'll start with first, if you remember the data table in the data sheet, this is where all the data for all the states are. So now I want to only bring in the data for the top 10 states, which with the measure as chosen by the slicer. Okay, so let's do one step at a time. So first thing I want to do is I want to bring in, let's say, all the data. So I'm going to use the index function and say, bring the data from the table named data, and then the row number. How many rows do I want? I want all the 52 rows. So you can do 52 if you know that that's the number of rows in your data. If you want it to be dynamic, I can actually say rows of the data table. And then the way to extract all the 52 rows of data, you have to put a sequence function in front of it. In a recent video, we explained this in detail, so I would link to that video in the description. So please check that out if you want more about this specific technique. So we do the sequence of rows of data. So this gives me all the 52 rows. Which columns do I want? So this one is tricky. So I'm going to go and open up the square brackets, and I'm just going to put one, okay, and then close the curly brackets, and then close my index function with a parenthesis and hit enter. This gives me all the state names. So how did I get it? Because the state is the first column, it brought me the first column, all the 52 rows. But what I also want is the unemployment percentage in November, right? So I need to go and find which column is it. So you can see, you can get this in multiple ways. So as I'm, selecting here, you'll see the bottom, there's a count, which tells me that M is the 13th column. And so if I go back to my report, go back to our formula, in addition to first column, say comma 13, comma 14. So now you'll start getting those columns as well. So we need to make sure that we have the right number here. So I'm going to go back here. This is 13, this is 14, this is 15. So those are the three items that I want. So I'm going to go back to the report sheet, and this 13, 14, and then let's do 13. Let me check one more time. So this is 13, month over month is 14, year over year is 15. So go back to the report sheet. So we have this now. Now we've got all the 52 rows, but we only want the top 10. So how do I limit it? I want to first sort this based on the metric that is chosen in the slicer. So I'm going to wrap it up with a sort by function at the beginning. And then what am I sorting by? Data. There is a column called value, which we created, which responds to the slicer. So whatever is chosen by the slicer, the value column will change. That's exactly what we want. So the data value column is how I want to sort it. But do I want ascending or descending? So I'm going to choose descending because we want the top value at the top here. So -1 tells Excel that I want descending order. So I'm going to hit enter, right? Now you automatically see all the unemployment percentage numbers are sorted in descending order. So it is working. There's only one last step. I only want the top 10. So go back, same formula. And so I'm going to choose rows function at the beginning. And at the end, comma, I want sequence of 10. Okay, that tells that it's 1, 2, 3. So I want the top 10 rows and hit enter. I get top 10 rows. That's it. So one formula to get everything we want. I'm going to select these and I'm going to control 1 to open the formatting menu. And then I'm going to just select uh, outline. And then I'm going to do one of these to the inside. Okay, this is again purely an appearance of choice. So this is top 10, and then I'm gonna select all of this, copy, leave a row in between, then paste it. Nothing has changed, I know, but we'll change this to bottom 10. And now you'll see the power of Excel by writing that formula. All we have to do now is to go into our formula. Instead of saying -1, if you remember, we did -1 to get the descending order, and now I want ascending. So I put 1, no other change, we are done. Again, we've done this in a previous video, very detailed about how to get top n and bottom n. In this case, we are doing 10. So I hard coded this to 10. If you want us to be some other number or dynamic, we'll do it differently. But all you have to do is to replace that 10. So top 10, bottom 10. So now for the last part, we want to have some arrows which tell us which column is being sorted by. Is it the unemployment percent or this or this? So I'm going to write some simple formula here. I'm going to say equals if the metric, which is the metric or the measure name, equals unemployment percentage, then I keep forgetting whether it's P or Q, but I will get it. I think it's Q. So let's do Q. And I'll explain what I'm doing here. So I've done Q, and I'm going to extend the formula to all these. But for the second column, this is month over month. And the third column is year over year. So in simple terms, what this is doing is if the metric chosen is unemployment percentage, put Q here. If it is, unemployment percentage month over month, then put Q here. There's only one Q here because we have chosen this. So if I click on this, it will automatically move. So let me center it. So the Q moved over there, the Q moved over there, and then the Q keeps moving. So obviously we don't want the Q there, we want an arrow. So why do I put a Q? Select these cells and change the font. I'm going to do Wingdings 3. You'll choose that. There we go. So now what happens is the character Q represents a downward arrow in the font Wingdings 3. So that's why that does it. So I'm going to copy everything and then paste it again, all those 3. But here, I don't want it to be downward arrow. I want an upward arrow. So for an upward arrow, the character is P in the same font. Because we copy pasted, the font carried over. But you can see basically that if It works the same way. Which column is being sorted, arrows carry over. Awesome. Now for the last a little bit, I do want to say, for example, um, in our final report that we presented, we actually had arrows here as well. So for example, this one would be the number of states with increase. So increasing, so if you want to show that as an upward arrow, you would want to enter P, decrease is Q, downward arrow. And if you want to say no change, I'm going to use the characters T and U. So I'm going to select these, change it to wingdings 3. There we go. So upward, downward. Again, if you want to choose a different one for no change, please do. But this is something that I've chosen just to illustrate how you can use the font wingdings 3 to display arrows and other characters if needed. One thing I'm going to do is this is upward. So I can change the font color to make it, let's say, if there is an increase in unemployment percentage, that's not good. So I can do red. And if it is a decrease in unemployment rate, that's good. So I will make it green. And if nothing happens, then I don't know, just put gray, copy, paste. There we go. So again, we don't need to change it versus previous year. It doesn't do anything dynamically. This is a static value because we don't, in our case, our numbers here, the number of states with increase, this is not going to change. And even if the numbers change, the representation of that is the number of states where there is an increase. So this is a static symbol, red upward arrow showing that there's an increase, and then green downward arrow, then the gray arrows to show no change. So that completes our report. And again, if you want to put a border around it, you can do Control 1, make a border. There we go. Okay. So this is what we started off wanting to achieve, a dynamic interactive report with a map visual that updates, and then also a top 10, bottom 10 tables. Now let's summarize this. We started off with raw data from the website, which looked like this. And we had a few questions that we wanted to answer. Ultimately, the data to decisions, it's all about getting answers to business questions or questions that will help your organization take decisions. And in this case, we started off with the questions like which states and how many states have increased their unemployment rate, which states and how many states have decreased. We compared it with the previous month. We also compared it with the prior year. And so can we get answers to those questions from this report that we created? Yes. So if I click on unemployment percent, I can see that Puerto Rico 5.7, Nevada 5.4, District Columbia 5. So one thing I forgot to mention is you can change the formatting here to make it a number format with only one decimal, so it stays consistent, easier to read. Okay, so District of Columbia 5, California 4. So you can see top states where the unemployment rate right now is the higher values. And also you can see whether they have changed in the previous month compared to the previous year and so on. Same thing, the states with the least unemployment rate, Maryland, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont. So these are the ones that have the lowest. You can also have the count of these states here on the left. That's straightforward. And then you have, you can click on unemployment percent month over month. And then now you can see this is sorted based on that. Louisiana, Maine, these are the states where the increase from month over month was higher. And you see here on the map visual that Louisiana is darker blue, Arkansas is darker blue because they have higher change month over month. Whereas, let's say, for example, the bottom one, Minnesota, it actually declined by 0.1 from October to November. You see, Minnesota is lighter in fill color. So that's exactly the type of insights that we want to get quickly and easily by clicking and interacting according to what we want to look at. And so you can hand this over to your customer or client to make it more a self-serve report according to their needs. They can explore the data. Again, it's a very simple scenario that we dealt with. We didn't have like too much history of data. We had like a snapshot of data than prior year. In future videos, we'll do more different scenarios, complex ones. But hopefully this was helpful. Please put your suggestions in the comment section. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon in another video.